Well, Elon Musk is being sued by the US government's financial regulator for failing to disclose his purchase of more than 5% of Twitter stock in a timely fashion.
He's the first to hit a $400 billion net worth, but this tech titan wants more. I'm talking about Elon Musk. He is building a town, and guess where it is located? In Texas.
Imagine that after a long shift, a police officer notices a driver speeding like there's no tomorrow. Curious, he follows the car, only to find out it is none other than Elon Musk himself. Can you imagine the surprise on his face? But here's the twist. The officer casually asks Elon to open the trunk, completely unaware that the whole scene is being recorded. What do you think Elon was hiding in that trunk? And how do you think this unexpected encounter will change the officer's day? What happens next? You won't see it coming. Stay tuned to find out this jaw-dropping encounter and reveal the unexpected twists. It had been a long day, and Officer Greg Towers was ready to head home. He parked his cruiser in the gravel lot outside Mel's Diner, enjoying the last few quiet moments of his shift. The street was quiet, lit up by the warm light of the setting sun, and the gentle sound of cicadas was a nice change from the craziness of his earlier calls, like a car accident, a shoplifting case, and even a cat stuck in a tree. Greg adjusted his hat and leaned back in his seat, letting out a tired sigh. The radio crackled faintly, but no urgent calls broke the peace. He reached for his coffee, cold but still comforting, and let his thoughts drift to the evening ahead. Leftovers from Sunday's pot roast, a dog that needed walking, and maybe, if he was not too exhausted, an episode of the crime drama everyone at the station could not stop talking about. Then a sleek, polished silver car zipped past him in a blur, so fast it almost did not register. What stood out was not the roar of an engine or the rumble of a motorcycle. It was the strange, quiet hum, like the whisper of an approaching storm. Greg sat up straight and looked at the radar gun on the dashboard. The number flashed, 68 in a 40 zone. Years of training took over. He threw his coffee aside and turned on the cruiser's lights. Red and blue lights lit up the street as he drove out of the parking lot, gravel flying behind him. Up ahead, the Tesla was already a few car lengths away, its sleek, modern design moving smoothly through the dimming light. Greg gripped the steering wheel tightly, his cruiser's engine roaring as it worked hard to close the growing gap between him and the sleek silver Tesla. His eyes narrowed with determination as he grabbed the PA system. "Driver of the silver Tesla," he called out in a firm, commanding tone, "pull over immediately." The response? Nothing. The Tesla remained on its steady, confident course, completely ignoring the flashing red and blue lights and the siren that now wailed across the quiet evening. Greg clenched his jaw. He'd seen this type before, entitled speedsters who thought the rules did not apply to them. Some were wealthy show-offs, some were drunk, and some were simply arrogant. Whoever was behind the wheel of this car was not interested in making his shift any easier. As the Tesla approached an older couple driving a sedan, it veered slightly into their lane, forcing the cautious driver to swerve to the side. Greg's heart rate spiked. Reckless driving. Perfect. Grabbing the radio, he called out to dispatch. "Unit 14 here," he said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "In pursuit of a silver Tesla Model S heading east on Pine Grove, speed approximately 70 in a 40, driver failing to yield, stand by for plate number." He squinted, trying to catch the numbers on the license plate, but the Tesla's tinted windows and aerodynamic frame made it challenging. Up ahead, the car seemed to slow slightly as it approached a red light. For a brief moment, Greg thought the chase might end there, but instead of stopping, the Tesla executed a sharp, calculated turn onto Birch Street. "Damn it," Greg muttered under his breath, yanking the wheel hard to follow. Birch Street was narrower, with parked cars lining both sides and a few pedestrians who froze in their tracks as the pursuit roared past. The cruiser's engine growled loudly, the sound echoing off the close walls of the street. But the Tesla was strangely quiet in comparison. It did not roar or rumble. It moved with precision, swift, smooth, and frustratingly silent. Greg's adrenaline spiked as he began to close the gap. The streetlights reflected off the Tesla's polished surface, making it gleam like a phantom in the night. He could see it clearly now, its sleek design and tinted windows giving no hint of who was inside. Yet something in Greg's gut told him this was not just any reckless driver. Whoever it was, they were important, or at least important enough to believe they could outrun him. "Dispatch!" Greg called out again, his voice clipped. "Still in pursuit. Speed holding at 65. Suspect appears to be slowing down. Stand by." Up ahead, the Tesla finally seemed to acknowledge his presence. It signaled of all things, and began pulling over to the side of the road. Greg frowned in confusion. That is unexpected. Most drivers in a high-speed chase either panicked or bolted, doing everything they could to escape. But this one? It acted like it was on a casual Sunday drive. Greg parked his cruiser a safe distance behind the Tesla, switching off the siren but leaving the flashing lights on. For a moment, he stayed in his seat, his eyes locked on the sleek car ahead. The adrenaline still coursed through his veins, and years of experience told him to approach with caution. Something about this situation did not sit right with him. Taking a deep breath, Greg reached for his flashlight. The weight of his badge seemed heavier than usual as he stepped out of the cruiser, his boots crunching against the pavement. The cool night air carried a strange, almost eerie stillness, broken only by the faint hum of the Tesla's engine, or whatever passed for an engine in these futuristic machines. The car sat motionless, its sleek silver body gleaming under the streetlights like a predator waiting to strike. Greg's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the driver's side window. Something about this felt off. The scene was too calm, too calculated. He tapped on the glass, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the tinted pane. The window lowered with a smooth, quiet hum, revealing the man behind the wheel. Greg froze. His brain struggled to process what he was seeing. Elon Musk? The name slipped out before he could stop himself. There he was, sitting in the driver's seat. The man who had redefined electric cars, launched rockets into space, and dominated headlines around the world. Elon Musk.
Elon Musk has launched rockets, built a major car company, bought Twitter and turned it into X, planted a chip in the human brain, and helped Donald Trump win the presidential election. What next? What will Elon Musk do next?
The Tesla guy. The SpaceX guy. He was right here, looking at Greg with a calm, polite smile, as if this were just another routine traffic stop. "Evening, officer," Musk said smoothly, his tone casual but composed. Greg blinked, his mind racing to reconcile the events of his otherwise uneventful shift with the extraordinary man sitting in front of him. This was not just a reckless driver, it was one of the most famous and scrutinized people in the world. The excitement bubbling in Greg's chest quickly turned into a heavier, more pressing emotion: fear. He had read the stories, seen the viral videos, and watched as officers across the country were dissected by the media for every move they made during encounters with celebrities. One misstep, one wrong word, and he could find himself at the center of a media storm. But letting Musk go was not an option either. The law was the law, and speeding recklessly through town was not something Greg could ignore, no matter who was behind the wheel. Clearing his throat, Greg forced himself to speak, keeping his tone steady and professional. "Mr. Musk, I'm going to need to see your driver's license and registration, please." "Of course," Musk replied smoothly, his expression calm and composed. He leaned over, opening the glove compartment with practiced ease. His movements were deliberate, almost calculated, as if he knew Greg was watching his every move. Greg's flashlight followed Musk's hands as he retrieved a small leather folder. Each motion seemed precise, as though Musk was aware of the weight of the moment and how any misstep could be misinterpreted. Greg tightened his grip on the flashlight, his pulse still racing, and reminded himself to focus. No matter who was in the driver's seat, his job was to enforce the law, and he could not let nerves or Musk's fame get in the way. The cop's pulse quickened as he stood there. He's probably done this before, Greg thought to himself. People like Elon Musk did not speed through life without brushing up against the law at least once or twice. Musk handed over his license and registration without a moment's hesitation, his movements calm and confident. "Thank you," Greg said stiffly, taking the documents. "Sit tight for me." As Greg turned back toward his cruiser, he felt the weight of Musk's gaze following him, sharp and unwavering. Each step back to the car seemed heavier than the last, his heart pounding harder with every movement. Finally, he slid into the driver's seat, shutting the door behind him and exhaling a shaky breath. Placing the license and registration on the passenger seat, Greg leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. "Okay, think. What's the play here?" he muttered under his breath. Opening his eyes, his gaze fell on the license in front of him. The name Elon Musk seemed to leap off the card, as if it had been written in bold letters just to mock him. Excitement flickered in his chest, but it was quickly tempered by a cold wave of doubt. What if I mess this up? What if I come off too aggressive, or worse, too lenient? Greg shook his head and reached for his laptop, typing in Musk's details with fingers that hovered momentarily over the keyboard before pressing enter. The database took its time loading, the spinning circle on the screen seeming to taunt him. As he waited, Greg's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Musk's Tesla sat in the same spot, motionless and sleek under the streetlights. It did not look like a car, it looked like a spaceship parked on Birch Street, its soft red taillights glowing faintly, giving it an almost otherworldly presence. For a fleeting moment, Greg wondered if the car had cameras inside. The idea made his stomach tighten. What if he's recording me? The database finally loaded, snapping Greg out of his thoughts. He scanned Musk's record quickly, his eyes darting across the screen. Everything was spotless. No outstanding warrants, no previous violations. Elon Musk's record was as clean as his meticulously polished car. Greg leaned back in his seat, running a hand down his face. His nerves were getting the better of him, and he could feel his composure slipping. He knew he had to make a decision quickly. Do I play it completely by the book or handle this with the kind of discretion that won't make me tomorrow's headline? After a moment of heavy deliberation, Greg made up his mind. Grabbing the paperwork, he opened the door and stepped out of the cruiser. Musk was still sitting in the Tesla, calm and patient, as if he had all the time in the world. The longer Greg delayed, the worse this would look for both of them. Taking a deep breath, Greg straightened his shoulders and walked toward the Tesla, holding the license and registration in his hand. His heart was still racing, but his face was calm and professional. He had made up his mind. Stick to the script, issue a warning or a ticket, and move on. There was no need to turn this into a spectacle. As he reached the driver's side window, he cleared his throat. Musk looked up at him, still composed, with the faintest trace of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Mr. Musk," Greg began, keeping his tone steady, "everything checks out here. However, you were clocked at 60 in a 40-map zone and failed to pull over the first time I asked. That's reckless driving, especially in a residential area." Musk nodded, his expression unchanging. "Understood, officer," he said, his voice calm and measured, as if he had anticipated this outcome. Greg glanced at the Tesla again, its smooth, polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. It was an incredible machine, quiet, powerful, and undeniably fast. A marvel of engineering, no doubt, but it did not belong speeding through the quiet streets of a small town. Just as Greg reached into his pocket to pull out his notepad and start writing the ticket, a faint noise reached his ears. It was low and muffled, but distinct enough to pierce the stillness of the night. Greg froze, his pen hovering over the notepad. His eyes flicked to Musk, who remained calm, his expression unreadable. "Did you hear that?" Greg asked, tilting his head slightly, trying to pinpoint the sound. "Hear what?" Musk replied, his voice casual, almost disinterested. Before Greg could respond, the noise came again. Thump! This time louder and followed by a faint shuffling sound. The noise seemed to be coming from the back of the car. Greg's instincts, sharpened by years of experience, immediately kicked in. His posture straightened, his senses heightened, and his grip on the notepad tightened. Something was not right. "Stay here," Greg said firmly, his voice carrying an edge of authority. Musk nodded, his demeanor still calm, as if he hadn't noticed anything unusual. Greg stepped toward the rear of the Tesla, his steps cautious. The car sat unnaturally still, its quietness almost eerie, as though it were holding its breath. The streetlights above cast long, sharp shadows over the trunk, making it look darker and more ominous than it should. For a moment, Greg just stood there listening. The silence stretched out, broken only by the faint, ever-present hum of the Tesla's systems. He leaned in closer, his ear nearly brushing the edge of the trunk, straining to catch the faintest sound. Then it came again, thump, followed by a soft shuffling noise like something or someone moving inside. Greg's pulse quickened. His hand instinctively moved toward his flashlight as his eyes narrowed, scanning every inch of the car's rear. Something was definitely in that trunk, and whatever it was not supposed to be there. Greg straightened up, his heartbeat accelerating as his mind raced through a flurry of possibilities. Could it be an animal that slipped in unnoticed? Unlikely. Tesla trunks did not just pop open like older cars. Maybe something inside had come loose. Or perhaps it was something worse. His stomach tightened at the thought. With a steadying breath, Greg walked back to the driver's side of the car, his hand now resting lightly on the holster of his sidearm. Musk turned to look at him again, his expression still neutral, but now tinged with a watchful curiosity. "Mr. Musk," Greg said carefully, his voice measured, "I need you to step out of the vehicle." For the first time, Musk's calm demeanor showed a faint crack, a slight raise of his brow, and a brief pause before he responded. "Is there a problem, officer?" Musk asked, his voice steady but cautious. "There might be," Greg replied firmly. "Please step out of the car." Musk sighed lightly, as if he were mildly inconvenienced by the situation, but he complied. Opening the door, he stepped out of the Tesla with movements that were deliberate and composed. He was taller than Greg had expected, his presence commanding even in something as simple as a jacket and jeans. Greg gestured toward the back of the car. "I need you to open the trunk." Musk's brow furrowed slightly as he crossed his arms. "The trunk?" "Yes, sir," Greg said, his tone firm but calm. "I heard something back there. I need to check it out." Musk hesitated for a moment, his gaze shifting from the officer to the trunk. When his eyes returned to Greg, the faint smile that crept onto his face felt less natural, more forced. "It's just cargo," Musk said. "Nothing illegal, I assure you." "Then you won't mind opening it," Greg replied, his grip tightening on the flashlight. The tension in the air was palpable now. Across the street, a group of teenagers had gathered, their phones raised to capture every second of the unfolding scene. Greg ignored the eyes on him and kept his focus squarely on Musk. After a moment of silence, Musk gave a small nod. "All right, officer, but I'm telling you, it's just equipment." He moved to the back of the Tesla, Greg following closely behind. Musk pressed a button on his key fob, and with a soft mechanical whir, the trunk slowly began to open. Greg's breath hitched as the lid rose higher, his flashlight cutting through the encroaching shadows. The soft beam of light danced across the interior, illuminating the trunk little by little. For a split second, Greg thought he saw movement, his muscles tensed, ready for anything. Finally, the trunk was fully open. Greg instinctively leaned forward, his flashlight casting a bright beam into the space. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Inside the trunk was a neatly arranged pile of boxes, each one bearing bright, colorful labels. The logos on them were instantly recognizable. Hope Tech Initiative, a charitable organization Musk's companies frequently partnered with. The boxes were carefully stacked, their labels reading emergency relief supplies in bold letters. Nestled among the boxes in a small carrier cage was a scruffy, slightly nervous-looking dog. The source of the mysterious thumping noise was now clear. The dog must have shifted in the cage, causing the sound. Greg blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. Slowly, he lowered the flashlight, his gaze moving to Musk, who stood with his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "It's Beast," Musk said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a faint warmth to it. "I found him wandering near one of our facilities a few days ago. He's a little skittish, but I could not leave him there. Figured I'd drop him off at a shelter on my way." Greg's eyes returned to the dog, The little creature's wide eyes reflected the flashlight's beam, and its tail gave a hesitant wag, barely visible through the mesh of the carrier. "And the supplies?" Greg asked, trying to piece it all together. Musk gestured toward the boxes. "They're for a relief drive upstate. There's been flooding, and people need essentials, food, blankets, solar-powered chargers, the usual stuff." He paused, glancing at the car. "I was running late, so I might have pushed the speed limit." Greg stared at the neatly packed supplies and the anxious dog. The tension that had filled the air moments ago was quickly replaced by a sense of clarity. He exhaled deeply, his grip on the flashlight relaxing. This was not the ending he had been expecting, but it was one he could live with. Greg felt his neck flush with embarrassment. He had let his imagination run wild, envisioning something shady or dangerous hidden in the Tesla's trunk. Instead, what he found was an act of pure generosity, relief supplies for flood victims and a rescued dog. Clearing his throat, Greg straightened up, forcing himself to regain his composure. "Mr. Musk," he began, his tone measured, "I appreciate what you're doing. It's admirable. But speeding like that, especially through residential areas, is dangerous. You could have hurt someone." Musk nodded, his expression sincere. "You're absolutely right, officer. There's no excuse for it. I'll make sure to keep it under control from now on." Greg hesitated, weighing his options before stepping back. "I'll let you off with a warning this time," he said firmly. "But you need to slow down, all right?" "I will, officer," Musk replied, offering a small, genuine smile. As Greg walked back to his cruiser, he could not help but glance over his shoulder one last time. The sight of the little dog peeking out from its cage, coupled with the neatly stacked relief supplies, stayed with him. What had started as a tense stop filled with nerves and doubt had ended on an unexpectedly heartwarming note. Sliding back into his car, Greg watched as the sleek Tesla pulled away, driving at a reasonable pace this time. A quiet sense of respect settled over him. Musk's humility and willingness to own up to his mistake were refreshing. But Greg's day was not over yet. That evening, as he sat down to unwind, his phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications. To his shock, a video of his interaction with Musk had gone viral. He hadn't even realized he was being recorded. The story took an unexpected turn when Musk himself shared the video on his social media accounts. In the now famous clip, Greg could be seen conducting the routine traffic stop with calm professionalism after catching Musk speeding in a residential area. Musk retweeted the video with the caption, "Caught speeding fair and square. Officer Towers handled it with professionalism and respect, a great example of what community policing should look like. And yes, I'll watch my speed next time." The retweet sent the video into overdrive, racking up millions of views within hours. Social media erupted with praise for both Musk and Greg. Users admired Musk's humility in admitting his mistake and commended Greg for his firm but respectful demeanor. Local news outlets quickly picked up the story, shining a spotlight on Greg. One reporter noted, "Officer Towers demonstrated that even in high-pressure situations involving high-profile individuals, integrity and professionalism matter most." The sudden attention was overwhelming for Greg, who was not used to the spotlight. Yet, as he reflected on the day's events, he realized something important. His actions, though simple, had made an impact. In the face of unexpected challenges, he had stayed true to his principles, and that was what mattered most. Greg, who had initially approached the traffic stop with hesitation and nerves, found himself hailed as a local hero overnight. His calm and professional handling of the situation with one of the world's most well-known figures became a shining example of what community policing should look like. He showed that no matter who is behind the wheel, be it a billionaire tech mogul or an everyday citizen, the law must be applied with fairness, respect, and integrity. Now let's turn it over to you. What would you do if you found yourself in Greg's shoes, pulling over someone as famous as Elon Musk? Do you think law enforcement should treat celebrity cases differently, or should everyone be held to the same standard? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them in the comments below. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.